Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome back to the Couchside Judges. I'm Scott Fontana. Follow me on Twitter at Scott_Fontana.
And I'm Dan Urban. Follow me at The Dan Urban. Follow the podcast at Couchside Judges. And subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen.
Make sure you do it also on X, because I keep saying Twitter, and I know it's X, and I'm still going to call it Twitter, but, you know, that thing.
And make sure you read the scoring criteria, because we're going to talk about it today. And some of the changes we like about it.
We just might talk a little bit about the criteria today. Just a hair, maybe even a little bit more than normal. And we've got the perfect guest to be doing that with. And it is none other than the pod god, Sheehan. Sean, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Hello, guys. Thank you very much for having me. It's almost like two religions joining each other here today for this one. The religions of judging criteria that people will never ever listen to, but we continue to do it anyway. So it's great to be joining you.
Not every religion has to be the most popular, not everyone's, Christianity and Islam. We got our weird little niches too, and that's where we fall in, right?
Indeed. I was trying to make like a Sal D'Amato Scientology joke there. A Salentology, let's call it that.
Salentology.
That's our religion here.
Yeah, that would be the religion that everybody just makes fun of on social media because nobody can stop. Which is that's a whole nother conversation, but like, come on, Sal does a good job. Anyway, we are joining forces today to talk about something that we've been wanting to do for a while. We put it out there on social media a while back, and Sean, you had expressed interest in being a part of that conversation. We want to talk about ways that we can actually improve or modify or tweak whatever it is for the MMA scoring criteria the way it is written. We have this document. People complain about judging. I think Dan and I especially, and I can't speak for you, Sean, maybe it's the same, but I find if you have trouble with the way things are judged, you really need to start looking at the words in the document, in the criteria, and say, well, what is it here that's missing that can maybe be improved upon to make judging either better understood or more clear, not just to the people watching, but maybe even to judges who interact with the criteria in a less frequent way than say the Sal D'Amatos of the world, the Ben Cartledges of the world, this and that. That is what we're here to do today. I'm excited for this nerdy talk. I hope, Dan, you are. I hope, Sean, you are. I hope you brought your big guns in here and how we're gonna maybe make this a different, better world, right? We're just a couple humble people. We're not gonna solve everything, but we'll have some conversation. We'll have some fun, right?
For sure. I'm ready.
Hopefully. Or else people listen to this and be like, these idiots, they're talking about judging me. Well, that's hopefully the audience though. It's, I feel like my audience, obviously your audience as well, is an audience that wants this type of content. And,
yes.
Hopefully we can, we can make some inroads and maybe throw a few good ideas out there. Maybe Mike Mazzulli might be listening or Andy Foster or something like that. And we might see a bit of change even, but,
the hope is that at least we kind of get it out there and get people talking about maybe the right things. We're always talking about the wrong things. And usually it's like, let's throw 7 judges cage side, or let's put them in a soundproof booth so that they can't smell, see, taste, or hear whatever's going on in the arena. But they need to be able to know what's going on in the fight. It's like, well, come on, we're going to come up with ways to actually tweak the wording of the criteria that the judges use in ways that hopefully could improve it. And of course, it's just suggestions, but we might as well dive into, I think, the nitty gritty here. And actually, before we do that, I should point out, we are not going to be talking about open scoring in any way. It's not that conversation. Open scoring is not something that would go into the MMA scoring criteria as is anyway. That would be a very different thing and a different place for that, right? That would go into the rules and whatever. And really, we've never seen it as a judging fix. We've always seen it as more of a fighter tool. So I think we leave it out of there. As much as I know Sean is anxious to talk about open scoring all the time.
Next.
Yeah. We're moving away from that. We will lead off with, I think, something that doesn't have to be controversial. I think we could just really talk about it earnestly, right? Where is the criteria as written weak? Where is it weaker? Where is it not its strongest? Where can we improve upon it? Where do we need to start looking? And Dan, I think I want to lead with you if you have any ideas first.
I think it's weakest in terms of effective grappling. I think that can definitely be improved. I think we got to define effective grappling better and define grappling damage. That needs to be the most important in my eyes here. I think there's a devaluing of grappling, almost as somewhat comes off as an overcorrection a bit from the days when you just get on top, you get that takedown, and you win the round. And I kind of think it got overcorrected to the other way, where it's like now they write in the criteria takedowns are just a mere change of position. It's a start of an attack. And
it's absolutely more vague than really it ought to be. I think as written, obviously, as we know, and we've discussed on the show before, and we've heard from officials before, that the criteria is left to a certain point vague, open, I guess is probably the better word for it, because there are just so many permutations of things that can happen in a fight, right? But I do think that based on the fact that especially Dan and I have taken the ABC course. Sean, have you taken any courses or anything like that with any of the officials overseas?
I haven't, not officially.
So what do you know?
Exactly. I've taken the well, maybe I shouldn't say it. I've taken the years and years and years of daily texts, being told, why are you saying that in the podcast? That's not right. This is how you do it, and getting 9-minute long voice notes 7 times a day type of thing. So that was my. I think that's maybe slightly better than the 1-hour course that the UFC officials and things did. But yeah, no, I haven't taken an official one yet. Actually, Mark Goddard did one once, but I think I was away. So hopefully, if he comes back and does it again, I'd be able to do that. But no, I haven't officially done it yet. No.
Sure. And I'm teasing you, of course, Sean. But the one thing that we kind of took away from that ABC course that was, it was led by Kevin McDonald. Sal D'Amato was also a participant, and some were other judges as well, kind of who were on hand, also let some of their expertise as well. But we did come away with some understandings from the way that they would judge grappling that aren't really as expressed in the criteria as written, but they're kind of meant to, I guess, be taught. But that seems like a silly thing. Like, why not just try to find ways to put it into the document? That's where I felt was a bit of a deficiency, especially when it comes to grappling.
To finish my thought before I got distracted because the computer went a little wacky. They say a successful takedown isn't just a mere changing of position, but I do think it's a very difficult task. I think it's 100% an offensive attack, and I think it should be scored regardless to what it leads to. If it leads to nothing beyond that, so what? I mean, it's still a successful offensive attack of one fighter imposing their will. Once the takedown's established, now you can start a separate scoring segment. I don't think they have to be lumped in together, where the takedown's considered a successful attack only if. And I kind of disagree with that. Anybody can ball up their hand and throw a fist. 100% of people in the world can throw a fist and land a punch, luckily. That is not true about shooting a double leg. And I think it should be more respected.
Sean, you have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't totally disagree. I just would love to know how that would be worded. And I think, I listen to you guys talk often, and that's the biggest area of contention I think you have. And, listen to John Anik, I think, has had a similar thing. And I if you were to put the overall thing is not effective grappling, is grappling underscored maybe, or undervalued, let's not say underscored, undervalued in the current criteria, I would probably say yes. Now, the argument is, should it be that way, or should we change it? I'm probably on we should probably change it a little bit thing, but I think the wider point here, and maybe the wider point of this whole discussion, is the writing of the criteria. And if we were to write everything into the criteria that the judges understand or that can explain to you after a Saturday Night Fight night, we would have not a 3 or 4 page document. We would probably have a 300 or 400 page document. And to have brevity in that is an unwinnable task. It's not something we can do. I would nearly, and maybe I'm giving away my fixes for the criteria here, but I would nearly even make it shorter, to be honest, and make it easier, make it more bullet pointy. But you made the point there, and I think it was an interesting one, and or maybe you didn't necessarily make the point, but you were kind of going towards that. When you listen to the people in the ABC, what would you call it? The talk, or the Mark Goddard's course, or the Kevin McDonald's course, they explain to you. And I guarantee you, Mark Goddard probably said the same thing that Kevin McDonald would say, that Ben Cartledge would say, that Sal D'Amato would say. And even if that's not written, it feels like all the judges are on the same page. Now, it might be page 197, but they do all seem to be on the same page. And I think that part is honestly the most important part, the fact that they're all on the same page. And maybe we need an ongoing explanation of the criteria rather than one thing we can kind of continually go back to like we have at the moment.
I kind of like the idea of almost a living document you're sort of describing here. That's a very hard thing, obviously, when we're talking about a document that everybody more or less has to approve, right? That's the tricky part, is bureaucracy. That's where it comes into play. And my understanding is that the Rules and Regs Committee is constantly at least talking about a lot of the stuff that we even talk about, but they can't get it to the point, or haven't gotten to the point in several years, to make any sort of changes that everyone can kind of get behind. And that is more the issue. So bureaucracy and a lack of unanimity, I guess, sounds like split decisions, right? More or less. I think one of the things that is at least the least clear when it comes to the grappling is really how much, to what degree we're really trying to weigh submissions and that kind of thing. How clearly are we supposed to factor in, especially when it comes to when we're getting to eights, when we get into the D's and that kind of thing? How much are we supposed to weigh actions that are put forth in the grappling department toward a submission? We're supposed to look for the result, right? We're scoring the result. We're not scoring the action. That is what they teach in the course too. I feel like it's not necessarily as clear in the written language what it ought to be. And it really ought to be a little more clear in terms of that. It doesn't have to be spelled out for every single submission and every single point of it and that kind of thing. But I think we need to come up with a better way to understand, how do we score damage from a submission? When are we supposed to? And, and that kind of thing, because I've talked to officials, you guys have talked to officials, and you can get different answers from them on how you're supposed to treat a submission and the different phases of it in terms of the scoring. And I think we need to probably get everyone on the same page a little more on that. And I think there's a way to do it in the writing. I have that I'm going to share with you on the show? No, because we're not going to do a boring document written show, but we're talking about these things, right?
Well,
any thoughts on that, either of you?
To go by the document real quick, it says impact, which is damage, also be assessed when a fighter's actions using striking and or grappling lead to a diminishing of their opponent's energy. So grappling is a very taxing part of the sport. If you sap a guy's energy because you just overwhelm him, that should count as damage according to the document. But you got to write it better, I think.
I don't know. If you sap a guy's energy by circling around the cage and making him run after you, that's not damage, is it? That's a very thin line, and I think I think what we need to do is move that line a little bit, because we just talked about there a minute ago, and I think we'd probably all agree that grappling like that, taking someone down and laying on top of him, is probably undervalued at the moment and was overvalued before. But the thing about it is, the effective grappling is probably a little bit overvalued in terms of, let's say, a rear naked choke. And if someone really is going for it, they're being forced to defend, judge is going to score that pretty highly. But that doesn't have that much of an effect, right? It's not like maybe it'll tire, you could argue it could tire the person putting the rear naked choke on more than the person defending it. We've seen that before. But we understand MMA and we understand that is an offensive move, so that therefore it's scored higher. But it feels like sometimes a punch or a kick or a strike that has more of an effect will actually get scored less than that, because we know MMA and we want MMA to be MMA and not to be kickboxing or boxing. So we overscore a little bit. So we underscore the start of the grappling maneuver, it feels like, and we overscore the end maybe a little bit. But maybe we don't overscore it. Maybe it should be scored like that. And I think that's a fair argument. And you know what? I'd probably argue that way myself, because we want it to be more like MMA. But I think, say if we look at a takedown, at the moment, it's kind of the changing of position. If it's a slam or if it's a big hard takedown, obviously if it's scored more, if it causes an impact, causes damage. But if we looked at it, let's say a takedown, we look at it like, 2 jabs or something like that. We scored it a little bit more. That it's not just, okay, we need to go to the secondary criteria to score that. If we did score it a little bit higher in it, and it was part of, let's say, a fight that had very little effective striking or grappling. It's one that has, 10 jabs versus 10 jabs, and we're deciding whose jabs were more effective. We may be thrown in the takedowns a little bit more. Now, this is ideas. I'm not talking about how it is at the moment. Maybe that would be a better part of or better way to do it. Again, how do you write that? It's very, very, very tough, I think.
That is the real problem here, is how do we come up with language that's going to do it? We're not going to solve it on this show necessarily, but that's really the crux of everything, is how are we going to turn the way everyone kind of feels about certain things into words that not just make sense and allow for, a certain flexibility in the way we score certain rounds, but also can pass through a commission and allow state regulators to say, yes, we'll approve that kind of thing. It's obviously the tricky part here. I think we could probably go deeper into grappling, but we definitely do want to get to some other parts. We could circle back to grappling, but I was just curious if anybody had any thoughts on something I'm going to bring up here, which is with regard to, you mentioned the second criteria. I'm talking about the third criteria now, which is of course control, cage control, ring control, area control, whatever. I have a big problem with the fact that we use the word control at all in this case, because the way we're talking about control when we watch a fight, when we engage with a fight, when we're told the action that's going on in a fight these days, control that the UFC constitutes as control is kind of different than the way it's actually written and utilized in the scoring criteria. And I think that in itself has led to a lot of confusion with the way you're supposed to score a fight. I would love to see them revisit the word control, and I'm not saying they change the way control is defined, but actually change the word that's associated with that definition. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I feel like getting rid of it completely.
well, there's that, but
I agree.
I think, I mean, I have that idea as well, but let's say for argument's sake, they are loath to get rid of secondary and tertiary criteria. We're stuck with them. I feel like we need to do something a little different with that word, just to get it not associated anymore with, just sitting on top of somebody and in their guard, which is what the UFC would constitute as control, and that is not control. We're talking about sitting in someone's guard. That is a neutral position. It is a neutral position. Should not be that way.
Yeah. There's a lot of defining for that, because you'd have to define it for what do you consider control for a stand-up fight, and what do you consider control for a ground fight.
Sure.
Where are you going? So you'd have to define both, and I don't know if it would be that much, if it would be very equal.
Sean, what do you think?
I think we need to roll back a little bit to what you said a minute ago. Like, we need to get rid of the secondary and tertiary criteria, right? We just need.
I'm very okay with that.
Yeah, I think look. I know we're looking for solutions. That's my number one solution. We've all said it now in the last 30 seconds here. Get rid of them, but we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater either, though. We can, the control part, the effective aggression, we can put them in, like, it should be an addendum far away from the first part so people don't mix it up. I agree with you taking out the word control, and I think we almost need to have like an outlier section, right? So it's a decision that someone gets poked in the eye or something in the last second of the third round, and it goes to the cards, and one of those things, or with 5 seconds gone in the fifth round or whatever it might be, and we have to score that 10-10. That's where we need to look for octagon control. That's where we need to look for effective aggression, because if no strike has been landed and you want to pick a winner, now maybe that's not fair, but if that's the way they want to do it, we need to put that in a place away from how we score 99.999% of rounds, right?
Yeah.
And I think that would also be a good place for the rounds that are scored with the secondary and tertiary criteria, because I don't know if you guys have ever spoken to a judge who said, I went to the secondary and tertiary criteria on that one, but I haven't. There's a very famous fight that happened. I won't say the fight, right? But a very famous fight that happened in the last year. And it was a known fight that 0 fucking punches were landed. And I spoke to one of the judges that judged it, and he was like, "Oh, I nearly went to the secondary criteria. Nearly. I didn't go to the secondary criteria. It's the greatest example ever of a fight." You probably guess what fight it was. That nothing happened in, and the judges still didn't go to the secondary criteria. We don't need it. We need to take it out. We need to take all confusion out. We need to stop, like, John Jones tweeting out, "Oh, I've read the criteria. It says octagon control as a way to win the round," because that happens so often. It's happened for years. We saw Ariel Helwani today and he showed saying, I wonder what would happen if a fight with no punches landed happened and there was just a few takedowns happen. I wonder who would win that round. Is that a 10-10 round? So like the biggest people in the sport, from one of the best fighters ever to one of the biggest journalists ever, do not understand the basic writings of the criteria. So I think we need to even simplify it more to make it more evident, I think.
I love the idea of taking taking it out there and then moving it to, let's say, incomplete rounds, right? I think that's where you would probably refer to that, right, Sean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. Like I do think, like, well, that's another argument. Do we need it in incomplete rounds, or should we just score them 10-10s? Like, I would be on the 10-10 side of that, but that's not a judging criteria argument, really. That's a kind of a rules of the sport argument, to be honest. So, but I would move it there. Let's say we're going to keep it the way we have it, where they do want to score it with the, effective aggression, if there's no punches landed or whatever, and effective control. I would be happy to put it at the end of the criteria, away from the rest of it, so people don't really get confused.
I think you're really onto something there. I would also add, and we're talking about something we like that would not necessarily necessitate this, I guess, or maybe it would. The idea of the 10-10, I think the way the 10-10 and the 10-7 are written in the criteria are written in such a way that does not, it completely understates how infrequently we're seeing them, or they're, as written, intended to be used. It makes it sound like, you can go to the 10-7, it's not very often. But like, when I say not very often, the way it applies in real life is that we have never, to my knowledge, and maybe you know of one, Sean, but I don't think so. I don't think we've ever had more than one judge give a 10-7 on a round. It's always been 8-8-7. I don't know any otherwise.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And like, I think the 10-7 and the 10-10 are a little bit different, right? Because especially a couple of years ago, and we might talk more about the 10-8 in a while, but when the 10-8 was the proper 10-8, I think 10-7s came more into play. And I think people would like to see 10-7s come more into play. But when a 10-10 happens, unless it's an incomplete round, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
And we saw one recently, didn't we?
In France.
Yeah. So, and everyone saw that and it was like, this judge has made a mistake. This was incorrect. So I also think like the 10-10 part of the criteria could also be moved to the incomplete rounds part. It really could, because like you have enough devices for a judge, if it's 5 minutes, to use. Like, if literally the two fighters run around each other for 5 minutes, decide which one was slightly more controlling, and then you don't need the 10-10, right? So there is no case. If someone falls on top of someone, they lay there for 5 minutes, give it to the person on top. That just do it. We do not need the 10-10s, but we do, we might need them for the no contest, the incomplete round that goes 15 seconds. No problem. Put that in the addendum as well. But I just think doing that might avoid confusion a little bit, or take them out all together and say, go to www.judgingcriteria.com/the rest, and then there's like a 10,000 word document or something, or a 10,000 page document or whatever for the rest. But yeah, I just simplifying it, I think it'd be better.
Yeah, I would say you either get rid of the idea of the 10-10 entirely, or you get rid of the secondary and tertiary criteria. I feel like we're somewhere along the way there. I don't know how you guys feel about this too, but the idea that there are a lot of things that, maybe this is more to you, Dan. There are a lot of things that really just were outlined for when you're in the course, that they teach to people who are taking the course to become judges, that it's just not spelled out as cleanly as it really ought to be in the criterion language itself. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dan? Like, because we sat in the room together for, it was basically the whole day. It doesn't take a whole day to go over 3.5 pages. There was a lot in there that really, I think, could have been transferred over. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that sticks out using that example that that's pointed out to you, that's not really written there, is the imposing of one's will. If nothing happens and one person gets a takedown with 10 seconds left, yeah, that last second takedown wins you the round. And then I asked the question, I said, what if 10 seconds left, nothing's happened, you pull guard? Who wins the round then? And they said the guard puller, because you're the one imposing your will.
Sure.
So that's one of the things that's really, I remember.
And in position, well, I'm sure there's a way that something like that can actually be written in there a little bit. Going back even kind of to the idea that Sean was talking about before about the, or that I guess we were all talking about, but the idea of sapping one's energy, right? That it's such a weird thing because yeah, you can technically sap someone's energy by making them run around all day, and that's not. I don't love the language we are using for that. I think we need to find a way to make it a little more clear what's meant by that. You know, and maybe it is sapping their I mean, we've heard fighting spirit. I don't know if that's like kind of what we really mean there, you know?
Well, that's wording also in there. You diminish their fighting
Right.
spirit,
But maybe we get to that instead of energy, you know?
Yeah, I guess because I mean everyone's getting 10-8'd then in heavyweight if it goes past 5. So
also it should never go past 5 minutes. They should. Sean, how do you feel about my idea of 1 round heavyweight fights from now on?
I think from middleweight up, it should be just.
I'm okay with that too, actually.
Actually, just get rid of the middleweight division and the light heavyweight. Just have them all 185 to infinity is just the heavyweight division, I think.
So it's like what 180, or it's 171 plus, right?
Agreed. Yeah. Once you get above fucking Leon Edwards, it's just you're away. Like that's it.
I can understand the thinking there. Of course we're having fun here, but I would say, is there anything else that you guys kind of highlighted as somewhere that's particularly weakly written in the criteria? Sean, did you have anything?
You know, one part just of this whole discussion, I think we have to remember, right, that these 3.5 pages are written so that every conceivable thing that can happen will be held under these rules, under this criteria. So there's like nothing on earth that can happen in a fight that hasn't been thought about in these rules, right? So if you change something and let's say instead of the way we have it now, takedowns are scored more highly. They're scored as effective grappling, or there's whatever you want to call it, say. And so everyone just starts fighting like Marab. Just take down, let them up. Take down, let them up. Take down, let them up. Do we really want the sport going that way? You know, and we have to think about the overall sport as well when we're writing this criteria. And I think the adjustment of the criteria did have that in mind, and I think that's a good part of it. But I'm not necessarily saying the example I just gave would happen or will happen, but we have to think if it happens, and we have to think to write the rules are written now so that the fight is going to get finished, right? The rules are written so the person who's trying to finish the fight is either going to finish the fight or win by decision, and that's probably the best way to do it, I think. So that
is absolutely the best thing I think about the criteria. The way they did it is they focused specifically on trying to reward the fighter who was looking to end it.
The biggest area, just to answer your question, then that I completely avoided there a second ago, the biggest issue with this, and this is something I've been thinking about an awful lot recently, and I saw Luke Thomas voicing it as well. The criteria is really, really good at telling you who could have won the round, but it's for very close fights. It's not really good at deciding who won them. But I have thought about this for years and years and years, and spoke to literally the best minds in the game for years and years and years. And I don't know if there is another solution for it. And I honestly don't think there is. I haven't seen one come. The half point system's not going to do it. Open scoring's not going to do it. Counting up from 1 to 100 is not going to do it. Scoring the fight as a whole, as we've seen at one championship, is not going to do it either. So I think the biggest issue with it is one that we can't solve, unfortunately, and that's just close fights. And close fights are close fights. Look, if you punch me in the face, I punch you in the face. Who punched who harder? That's impossible to decipher.
I did it, Sean. I punched harder.
Probably.
Well, that's how every fighter thinks. It's like, well, I punched harder. It's like, that's the way I did it.
And that's the issue as well. I bet more on that guy, so he won. That's a big part of it too.
Sure. And I like the fact that you're highlighting that, because that really is an issue that I don't think we're ever going to truly iron out, no matter what numbers we kind of give, right? Because even if we go to 9.5, right? It's like, there's gonna be a lot of 9.5 rounds that people are still gonna argue about. And if we do 9.5 and 9, it's like, okay, some people are going to give a 9 and some people are going to give a 9.5 the other way, and then now we're going crazy over that, right? So I get that. I do think though, I'll save that. Actually, I'm gonna pocket that one for a little later, because I think that's more of a long shot change in my mind. But we should talk about the 10-8s in general, right?
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go
before we move on. I'm glad you were, Dan.
Yeah.
Why don't you say what you're gonna say about the 10-8s actually?
To kind of piggyback off Sean. I don't think it would fix a close fight. I mean, a lot of close fights we see are 2 razor close and 1 clear. And then the guy who won the 2 razor close gets the nod and everyone is up in arms because the other round was pretty clear. I think we got to get rid of the consideration as a word in the criteria.
Oh yeah, and any sort of
shout,
wishy-washiness, I don't love. It's can consider and all that. I think we need to figure out a better way. I like that, Dan.
Once you hit 2 Ds with damage being one of them, 10-8. That's it. And now you just have to argue. Did you check damage off? Did you check another D with it instead of, well, I had 2, but I don't think they were good enough to get there. Blah blah blah. So I just went 9. I think you hit 2 Ds with damage being 1. It's a 10-8. You hit all 3, you get a 10-7.
We're at the point where, we have sort of an unofficial way that things have especially been judged in California and Nevada, right? And I see Sean smiling and nodding because he knows.
Just about to say that.
Oh yeah, and it drives us nuts. I'm sure it drives you nuts. Just the fact that we have on the books language that technically matches the way it is enforced in Nevada and California. They're not doing anything that is strictly wrong. It can all match the criteria, because when you're looking to do an 8 at this point in those two regions, you're really looking for damage. That's what they're really truly looking for as one of the Ds. And as long as you do have that, but you don't have the other 2, or just say you have the other 2 but you don't have damage, you can consider it, but we would prefer it if you didn't. And that's more or less what it is. So it's not strictly illegal, but I think we need to get to the point where we've actually got that on the books. If it's been something that has been unofficial at this point for 2.5 years. 2.5 years ago was when Jan and Izzy fought. And it's ever since that fight, that's when there's the point of demarcation. Everybody knows it. It's very clear. We need to get that on the books now. It's well past time that everyone starts to get on the same page, because you shouldn't be judging it differently in Nevada than if you are in England. It's a very long way, but we're all basically using the same document. It should be done the same way.
I would 100% agree with that. I think that's a very easy solution with the criteria, though. All you have to do is have it exactly as it is at the moment, but say damage is a necessity when scoring 10-8s, right?
Sure.
And for a while there, and I think still somewhat, it's not just damage. It is, and I know I was pulled up on saying the word overwhelming damage before, because people use that for the 10-7.
I think I probably said that. It was probably me.
What would be a better word for, maybe, I don't know, maybe I don't know, just a lot of damage is needed. Let's get that way.
A large amount of damage, a high level of damage. Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to pull back on that a small bit, and I think we need to get back. And I don't know if you agree with this or not. I think you probably might. But 2 years ago, you mentioned the Izzy and Jan Blachowicz fight. If we got to the 2 years before that and we're scoring rounds the way they were scored for that 2-year period or whatever it might have been, I think we would be way better. So, you're asking for solutions. I don't know if we're to that part of it yet, but that's my solution. And it's the easiest solution ever. All I'm asking people to do is do what you did a couple of years ago. You did it perfectly. You did it really well. It went brilliantly. There was one hiccup that wasn't really even a hiccup. It was just some ball guy got mad, and then everything changed, right? I honestly, and I truly believe this, I spoke to some judges about it last week. If Nevada, Mike Mazzulli, and California all came together and said in private that we're going to change it back to the way it was, they released the press, they released a statement to the press, said that, I believe there would not be one article written about it. Dana White wouldn't be asked about it. Nobody would give a shit, because they wouldn't understand what's even happening. The 3 of us would, and about 6 other people on planet Earth would, apart from the judges, and we'd go back and we'd have a way better system. We'd have way better, more accurately scored fights. There'd be a way better, more well-defined 10-8. Then the 10-9 actually becomes way better, more well-defined. Do you know what? The 10-7 then becomes actually way better and more well-defined as well. And fights are scored so much better. It's a really easy fix. And there's 3 people that can decide it: Nevada, California, and Mike Mazzulli. The problem is, I don't think they want to roll back to 10-8s. I think they like them the way they are. I think they thought we were getting too many 10-8s, and I think they were wrong. I think it was perfect the way we had it, and we need to go back. And we can do it. That's an easy fix. I'm not looking for something wild. I'm looking for something we already did. and that's God Almighty. I hope you agree with me that it'd make things so much better.
I
No,
I
you're
do
nuts.
like
Terrible
that.
idea.
I think Scott would probably have the numbers, right? They released that document this year. They want 5% of
Yeah,
rounds
so it was
should be 10-8.
it was at the commission the ABC conference that we were at. Dan, you left early because you
Yeah.
just went for the courses, but I stayed for the whole conference. And yeah, that was a document that was more or less, I think, meant to be like an internal kind of thing that they just displayed. That's how I kind of took it.
But they didn't
Mark
touch
Mark
touch
Ramondi was
5%
actually the
though,
first to
right?
share that for ESPN,
But they're not even close to 5%, right?
no, they're not. They're not.
So
I think they hit almost 5%, but not quite in terms of rounds in which any judge gave an 8. That usually means roughly half of them had a majority 8.
okay.
So to get a round that has at least 2 or 3 judges that scored an 8, we're really only talking about 2-ish% of the time. And that's exceptionally low. It was more like a 5 before. Like Sean said, and I was of course being facetious. I completely agree. I think we had a good thing going. I still want a little more. I have some thoughts on that, but honestly, I would take that. I thought they're really, especially if you go by the data, 2020, before the whole Yana Nizzi thing happened, that whole year where we just had some of the brightest, most experienced judges, sharpest eyes and sharpest tools in the shed as far as judges and officials go. They were all working most of these events, and we didn't have better judging at any point ever on record. And I really would love to go back to that. I think Sean absolutely hit it on the head.
I
Yeah.
think we can do it as well if we're redefining it. So, like, I think everyone would agree, probably even the commissions and all, that we do need to redefine the 10-8 because it's just all over the place at the moment while still staying within the criteria. You know, I talked about earlier the criteria needing to explain every conceivable outcome. And even if you if you change those conceivable outcomes, it still falls under it, which has happened over the last couple of years. As much as they don't really want to kind of admit it, but it has changed, and you know, maybe you do it. You know, maybe you sneak it in there and go, oh, we're just adjusting it here, and we say, you know, staying the exact same, but damage is needed, and then like we're going to talk about the overwhelming damage for the 10-7s as well. We're going to leave that in there, but there's a difference between a lot of damage and overwhelming damage. And if there's a lot of damage, let's give our 10-8. So, but I wonder, maybe even for you, Dana, just a question: like, do you feel that making damage a necessity for 10-8s actually takes away from grappling? And like, maybe there should be, if you want to bring grappling more into it and score grappling more heavily, maybe 5 minutes on top without a lot of damage should be scored at 10-8.
Well, I think it takes away from a possible 10-7 from a grappling heavy round. The Bryce Mitchell-Charles Rosa fight is like the prime example. Bryce destroyed him. Constant sub-attacks. It's like, if he was throwing punches, I mean, it's probably finished or a 10-7 instead of trying to attack a twister and arm triangles nonstop on the back the whole way. So I do think it would probably takes away from more 10-7s being achieved. I don't think it's achievable with strictly grappling.
It is also very hard at present to get to a 10-8 on a almost strictly grappling round at this point. You know, the judges are really looking for that damage to still be in there. And so if they're not opening up with strikes, but they're going, you know, if they take the back and they're on the back for much of the round, they have even a body triangle, which can be absolutely sap the energy or the fighting spirit or the energy. You know, it definitely diminishes somebody over time. So we're really looking for something that I think needs to be addressed here and make it achievable for grapplers to actually get 8s.
Well, also there's not that many immediate impactful things in grappling that doesn't end a fight. It's like, yeah, I sunk in the choke and then you tapped out. That was immediately impactful. There's nothing. A lot of grappling is cumulative damage, and that doesn't weigh as heavy as written. I mean,
yeah, and that's fair.
I don't know, is it? I think a lot of it's not immediately impactful on someone's body, but I think it's scored as immediately impactful when you're forcing someone to defend. Like, I don't know, as like what would be cumulative? What grappling would be scored as a cumulative? Like just like laying on top of someone or taking someone down. I don't think that's necessarily scored as a cumulative. I think, as I was saying before, I think that gap between like the front end and the top end, it's very kind of wishy-washy and very kind of gray there. And even when we maybe disagree with that or have a different thinking about it, that's not a great thing either, is it? Because I do think if you're forcing someone to defend a rear naked choke over and over and over, the judges are scoring that the same way they would score a heavily, immediately impactful, strike, or a few, a combination of strikes, whatever that might be.
If it's in there, I would say if the sub is actually an attempt, a lot of times they're just grabbing the gloves and they're holding on and then they're stuck. Now they can't even punch because the gloves are so bulky they can't get their hands out to do anything, and that a lot of hand fighting there.
You bring up something that actually I didn't even mention, but I'm glad you brought this up, because one thing I would love to see addressed in the criteria somewhere is almost like a devaluing for one fighter who is anti-fighting, someone who is truly just doing things to try and stop the other fighter from doing anything while also not being able to do anything themselves. I would like to see something like that actually be punished in the criteria. So it should make it much easier for a fighter to maybe get to an 8 in that case, because if a fighter is absolutely knocked senseless and they've been put on their back and the fighter who knocked them knocked their head around is in mount, but they're hugging them in such a way that just so happens they can't do anything, but they're not getting up and not doing anything, that could be enough that keeps the other fighter from getting to that 8 that they might deserve. And that is ridiculous because it's anti-fighting.
I think that should be the role of the referee. I think another role of the referee should be to keep the fight in a place where it's giving the judge something to score. And we need to, I think that's something that could be better well defined as well. Because let's say there's a fight, right, and it is very close, and it's just a standstill for the last 90 seconds. If the referee asks them to move and then moves them himself, then we will see that round go from 9-9 either way to someone maybe landing a few strikes or getting a big takedown and getting a submission that wins them the round. I really, really, really think the referees need to help the judges more. And I'm not blaming the referees. I think that needs to be more well defined in the role of the referee from the commissions.
Sure. No, I can get behind that too. But I do think there is still room for us to try and put that in there somewhere that, like, look, if it is happening, if we're really seeing that, that's not something that should be rewarded. Because you'll talk, we all talk to officials, and we've heard some of them say, did they earn the 8 or did the other fighter earn the 9? It's like, how could a fighter get a 9 for fighting that way? That's anti-fighting, and I don't think that should be rewarded. So I'd love to see that defined.
Especially in guard, when someone gets taken down who doesn't want to be down, and they just lock them up in their guard and they hug them, and they start looking at the ref for, hey, you gonna stand us up to do something? I think it should be a timidity foul. You lose a point.
There's an important point as well we need to make in this, right? Because people are probably listening to this and saying, oh, you're anti-grappling, you'd never say that about a fight in the feet, right? If there's 90 seconds of no one throwing a punch on the feet, then put them on the ground. No, I've no problem with it. No problem with it. And people need to realize that as well. There's it never happens that there's that long with nothing happening on the feet. It's just one of those things. There can be 90 seconds of nothing happening on the ground, like literally nothing happening, and they're just allowed to stand there. Imagine stand there, pause the podcast for 90 seconds and stand there like this and see how long fucking 90 seconds is, and it's just never going to happen. So it's not that it's anti-grappling, it's just it happens in the grappling realm. If it happened in the striking realm, we'd change the rules tomorrow because it'd be the most fucking unwatchable sport on planet Earth.
You're probably onto something there. I think we should start moving a little closer to some of the ideas we have as far as realistic solutions. Let's focus on things that we really do think can absolutely get done in a room, even in the next year or so. Why don't you start, Dan? Do you have any ideas that really? I mean, we've covered a little bit in sort of the way we've talked about this, but
I do think we covered with the 8s, especially. I think that's the easiest fix. We can just throw in what we want to happen with if you're gonna score it, the damage is needed, just put it in there, and there you go.
It would be as simple as that. Absolutely, I agree. Sean, you got anything?
That's mine as well. Very easy. Damage is needed. Literally, damage is needed. Those 3 words. And then, slide in we're going back 2 years and start scoring fights the way we used to score it. No one would have to know. No, but everyone would know because fights would immediately start being scored better. And it's the most simple fix. It really is, and I think they should do it.
Sure, sure. I mean, I agree. I basically, I think we're in the process of having the conversations we've had, we more or less offered a lot of solutions, and a lot of them were, I think, realistic. Some of them we're talking about are a little more out there, right? Do you guys have any ideas for more long shot changes that you'd like to see? And in fact, I'm gonna take the floor for a second. I'm gonna lead off. And again, this is a long shot, but I do think it realistically ought to be considered is the fact that I think we need to expand the definitions of eights and sevens more in line to what we talk about on. We haven't done this as much in the last year or last couple of years really, but our couchside judges criteria where we kind of take an old fight and we'll adjust it so that, you know, a traditional 8 we would just score as a 7, and then we would look at some rounds that are maybe that quote unquote 10-8.5, we'll actually call that a 10-8. I would love to see it if we got to that point where, let's say, 10-7 is given out as often as the 10-8 is right now. But then we've also got room for rounds that no one would debate which way that round would go. Like everyone would sit there and say, well, that's obviously a 9. Rounds like that ought to be an 8. And, you know, we have to get there with certain wording of the criteria. I think that would probably mean something along the lines of 2Ds. And maybe that could be no damage is necessary. You can still get that middle score. How do you feel about that, Sean? Because you're an outsider on this one. I want to know how you think.
Yeah, like I don't think we need it, right? And when I was looking for, you know, an answer to this question, like what you're kind of saying there is basically a small change, but maybe written a bit bigger. You know, it's the small change we talked about would nearly do exactly what the bigger change or the bigger written change would also achieve. So yeah, I don't know. I really like I have some wild things, but I they wouldn't fit under the would this be applicable for every fight. Like here's one of the wild ones. I'll throw it out. This is wild. I don't.
Yeah, what do you got? What do you got?
So like here's and I wish I'm not saying this, but I'm gonna say it. At the end of like a 5-round title fight, if it's a split decision, imagine the 3 judges come together. They have a bit of a conflab, and they goes like, who won that fight? Not necessarily as a whole, but if you were to score this championship fight as like maybe as a whole, let's put it as a whole. But who do you think the winner was? Who won that fight?
Who did it feel like did better over the course of 25 minutes?
Yes, and like the split goes that way, but that's a very difficult thing, right? Because
yeah,
let's say it's Grasso or Shevchenko, and they decide after that, oh, Shevchenko, but Grasso got 2 of the 3 judges' cards. That's very tough on Grasso. So like, it's not a solution that would work. But I almost feel like, right, if you were to get the right winner, I feel like that's a solution that could work. And that was a draw, so that was a bad example. But you know what I mean.
I think I do understand what you meant. What are you thinking, Dan?
I kind of like that idea. But the problem is, you know, you always hear from other people, oh, you got to beat the champ to be the champ. And I think that might reign a little bit.
Yeah, true. That's exactly what my idea is. Kind of.
Yeah, like so, BJ Penn should have beat Frankie in the first one if they did that. Yeah.
We're going all the way back. We're going way back on that one.
More of the long shot changes I'd like to see we covered. I think we just strike aggressiveness and fight area control just get rid of it or put it somewhere else where it's, you know, in its own corner.
I feel like, yeah, that definitely qualifies as more of a long shot change. I feel like it shouldn't, but I do feel like it is actually more of a long shot that they would actually sit there and say, yes, we're going to get rid of that, because I think there's a little too much marriage to the idea of, well, what do we do with amateurs that don't do that much? And it's like, honestly, it's such a low percentage. It's not that necessary, but I think the middle ground is what Sean has posited, that we can kind of put it somewhere else under maybe incomplete rounds. Like I was saying, I think that might be like a good heading for it, right?
It wouldn't go away because you need that. Like Sean said, it's designed to cover everything that possibly could happen in this crazy sport, where a lot of crazy things that we haven't even seen happen yet are going to happen.
100%. I guess really what I would love for them to do too, and I like the 10-7. I'm going to preface this by saying I like that there's a 10-7. I actually want to expand the 10-7, as I just said. But if they're not going to make the 10-7 achievable, if they're not interested in doing it in such a way that makes a 10-7 be something that realistically happens, just get rid of the thing. What's the point? What's the point? We're talking about a score that's never been given out unanimously or even majority for any round that anyone has ever heard of. So what is its use?
Its use basically is bad refereeing, isn't it? You know,
almost in a sense, but I think they sort of wanted to get that language out of there for that, because I think there was the lack of indictment of the actual official for it. But, you know, talking about 10-7s, one of the things that I think this came actually from when we were talking about 10-7s at the ABC course. And I can't remember which official had said it, but there was a quote that they were talking about with regard to giving out a 7. And it was, I can't even remember which round it was, to be perfect. Oh, you know what? It was round 4 of Holloway and Ortega. I can tell you that. It was not an official who scored that fight, but it was a quote that I have written down, and it is, "I don't know what you scored that round, but my stomach turned." And I think you need to find a way to get that idea in there, as that's kind of what we're looking for a 7. I don't even know if you need to have overwhelming dominance and overwhelming duration to get to the 7. If your damage has reached such a high level, that really ought to be enough, but that's not what the criteria as written kind of allows for. So I would say that should change. And I think that is more of an achievable change.
I
you
agree.
Do you want it though? Or do you want a 10-7 to mirror a 10-8 more than it does a current 10-7?
I don't know that it needs to mirror the 10-8. I mean, it should work off of the Ds, right? I think we're still looking for damage, dominance, and duration. But really, I don't even know if we need dominance and duration for that particular one. I think damage is enough. If we have an overwhelming amount of damage, and I think I'll give you an example that just happened, and you didn't see it, Sean. I think you said you hadn't watched the most recent UFC, if I understand, right?
Michelle Waterson, was it? I've heard about it though. Is that the one?
With Waterson, Gomez, and Rodriguez. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, round 1 of that fight, unanimous 10-8. The damage is uncomfortable, but it doesn't really start for about 2 minutes into the round. You could actually give the first 2 minutes of that round, probably and almost definitely, to Waterson Gomez by like a narrow margin, because not much has happened yet. And from that point on, it is almost disturbing how long that fight goes and how much damage she takes and how much she is moving away from the situation and not fighting back and not looking like she is in this fight. Waterson Gomez, because Rodriguez is just destroying her. Now, kudos to Kerry Hatley, because I don't know that you needed to actually stop that round. I actually think it kind of was okay. It's almost like Holloway and Ortega. There's not necessarily one point where you said it's got to stop, but you're watching it and you're like, this is kind of ugly. This is really ugly. And when it gets to that point, it ought to be a 7. And I think you don't need overwhelming dominance to have lasted for 5 minutes and duration to be for 5 minutes. I think you got there.
Yeah, I was gonna use that same example.
Mm-hmm.
I know we do the 10-7 watch when there's unanimous 10-8, and by the book we both agree, no, this is a 10-8. But I would like a round like this to be a 10-7. It was so much damage, and like you said, he probably didn't have to stop it. But it's also, on the other hand, it's like Waterson is completely done. That she's not winning this fight or ever winning this fight. So
Dan, I actually want to keep the floor with you, though, because I do want to get back to the idea of kind of some of our more wild ideas. What we were just talking about, I think, is actually very achievable and very realistic if we wanted to go that way. Maybe it's more of a long shot. I don't know. But I want to hear your wild idea. We already had Sean's. What's yours?
I don't really have wild ideas when it comes to the criteria. I have ideas more as a whole of where I want MMA to go. I think there should be this, is that the fighter down or is not the fighter down. It shouldn't matter. You get front headlocked and you're on all fours, I'm going to blast you in the face with a knee. That's what I want to get to. I want to stop playing these games. I want 5-round fights to have an overtime round, so we avoid what we had a couple weeks ago.
You don't want dissatisfying title fights.
Yeah, there's no reason why a meaningless tough finale gets won, but a 5-round title fight that can change someone's paycheck by a large amount.
Forget their paycheck. It's like kind of their life.
And their life in turn, basically.
Yeah.
So nothing really, because I couldn't really think of anything criteria-wise that would be so crazy.
Oh, well, then let me take the floor.
Okay.
I've got something. Blow up the 10-point must entirely and replace it with an up to 5-point scale where each fighter gets anywhere from 0 to 5 based on their effectiveness. Could be a 0-0 round for like rounds where nothing is happening. Could be a 5-5 round for those crazy wars that we've seen, or anywhere in between. I think that would be an interesting way to do it, because then you would actually, from fight to fight, you'd have each round scored, and you could say, okay, well, this person only averages 1 to 2 points in their rounds, or like this one gets to 3, 4, or 5, or that kind of thing. I think it would be an interesting way to kind of start to reveal fight to fight, like how effective a fighter actually is in trying to get the action going. I like that.
Sport books would go wild with that. They'd have spreads. This guy's favored by 4.5. It's like
Gaethje, the over/under would be like a 4.5.
Yeah.
I think every round that he does. So, like I said, we're at the wild ideas, my friend. This is not something I would ever see happening. We're not seeing this in my lifetime. We're not seeing this in my children's or their grandchildren's lifetime. But I think it'd be fun. Am I crazy? What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, you're definitely crazy. Yeah. Like, there's some people who want to do like a 25-point must system where they have like 5 different areas, and then you score it from 1 to 5 in each of the 5 different areas, and then you get it could work. It could, no, probably not. On the overall things, there's 2 things, right? What Dan said about the down opponents, now, right? I would go either exactly what you said, let all kicks be allowed on the ground, or disqualify everyone who kicks someone on the ground. I don't know if you saw the Peter Queally fight last week. He got kicked on the ground. His eye nearly blew up, and it was a no contest. I'm thinking, like, when is that going to be a DQ? The guy threw a kick. He was on the ground, kicked him in the fucking face, and his eye blew up. That's not a disqualification. I'm like, what? And I understand why it's not a disqualification, because maybe he tried to kick him in the shoulder or disqualify everyone. I want more disqualifications as well, or just allow it, right?
It just happened last night.
I favor that way, the allow it all.
It just happened on Contender Series last night. 3rd round of a terrible heavyweight fight. One guy has his hand down. They say it's weight bearing. You know, it's up in air if it really was or not. Gets blasted with a knee, can't continue, and they rule DQ.
I like that we have somehow managed to make MMA into the NFL, where every week we're arguing about, is it a catch, or every week, hey, is that hand weight bearing or not? Like,
I have a solution. I have a solution for one of those problems.
What do you got?
I think this could be implemented tomorrow, and they should do it. Every time someone grabs the cage, give them a position. So it's either on top, in guard, standing, or an over-under against the cage. Every single time, right? So we never have to talk again about, should be a point taken. No, you can still take a point. And maybe we should have a rule that if you grab the cage 3 times, then a point is taken. Or if it's an egregious grab, like now, you can still take a point. But do you know, the people always say, the first warning is in the back. So you one little bit of, they touch the fence, take a point. I hate that shit. I hate it. So I think we need a solution for that. I think that's an easy solution for that. The grind strikes are a little bit different. I would like to use that solution also for the grind strikes, but it is very different. And it'll, you know, the issues with these as well are latent fights, and people will do things, you know, to get a position, or, you know, things can happen. There are issues with all of these things, but I really like that one, because I hate, do you know, I don't know if you watch much of One Championship, right?
Sometimes
the fight is not on the 10-point month system. It's scored as a whole. So you can't take points. So and they're kind of like, I've asked them recently, what you do? And they're like, you know, we'll take away 5% of repair. I don't know, we'll do something. And you know, and it's brilliant. It's way better. Just get rid of the taking away points. No more taking away points. Boom. That's my wild solution. But not realistically though, the cage grabbing one, I think that'll work perfectly.
I think a lot of people would prefer taking a position rather than a point deduction. Give me the position. That's what I wanted anyway.
I'm in favor of anything that lessens the number of harsh warnings and just gets to any sort of punitive measures. It doesn't need to be a point taken every time, but the idea of giving a position as a punishment, I'm okay with that. You know, I think we do need to get away from so many warnings, and it's ridiculous, because like we say, the first warning is in the back, but sometimes we see 2-3 warnings before they take a point in the cage anyway. So how many warnings is that? It's actually 4. It's ridiculous, and I definitely want to, but to steer it back, I think, before we can kind of wrap it up here. But if does anybody have anything, speak now or forever hold your peace, as far as we'd like to improve the criteria, be it, you know, big, small, realistic, crazy?
In conclusion, 10-8s, get rid of 2 and 3 in the tertiary criteria, and that would be a good start to find the damage in the 10-8s, I suppose, and move back. But also, right, and I'm sure you've talked about this many times, move the judges to a place in Nevada where they can see the fucking fights, and don't have them in front of those big things. I saw at Bellator the weekend, I believe. I don't think they had monitors. Give the judges monitors at all of these fights. Fly-in judges. We were here in Ireland at the weekend. Sal D'Amato was there. Dave Peabody was there. Brian Miner, fantastic judge, was there. Jordan Vallel was there, and a few more as well. And we've seen David Leatherby, I think, this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't see the fights, but I believe he was in.
Yeah,
Leatherby was in Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, and Ben Cartledge obviously have been brought out to Vegas as well. A guy like Darren Ransom, I'd love to see him brought out as well. I know he's done fights out in the out in Fight Island when it was there, and I think so. I think those are also very easy solutions that they kind of already have done, the bringing the judges and the flying them out. But I think moving the judges to give them a better view of the fight, move the cameraman or Bruce Buffer, whoever it might be, out of the way. And that's automatically going to get you less mistakes. I mean, maybe we won't see a whole lot of different scored rounds or anything like that, but it just takes away something bad happening, you know?
Sure.
That just sparked an idea for me that's never going to happen.
What you got?
That I think would be great, actually. As we know, judges can't speak publicly. We got the ref cam. Give each judge his judging cam. Release his perspective of the round.
His or her
video of what he saw, what their perspective was, and I bet that helps. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to say nothing. Here's what this judge saw from his exact perspective.
Sure.
And then that'll help.
You'd start to have everybody saying, "Oh, maybe Sal D'Amato was checking his phone."
and as Sean was saying, there's 8 panels at a UFC event. There's 5 that need it. The 3 judges, the 2 corners, and I guess 6 panels you need in the broadcast team.
Broadcast definitely needs.
So there's no reason why those 2 panels should be occupied, that have doors, should be occupied by a judge.
Amen. I'm with you there. I don't really have anything to add. I think we've covered a lot of bases. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think we solved, probably the entire thing. I think we fixed judging entirely. Congratulations, guys. Give yourselves a hand.
Yeah, we
No, hey, it's an ongoing conversation. Hopefully we added some interesting elements to that. Before we kind of close out, we'll, as we tend to, we look ahead to the next events, especially the major events that are coming up. And we've got another dual UFC and Bellator Saturday coming up, with Saturday evening, like early evening, or whatever that is for you, at ungodly hour it is in Ireland. Yeah, it's all the middle of the night for Sean. But yeah, so it's UFC Vegas 79. Starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time, with the headliner of Grant Dawson against Bobby Green at 155 pounds. You guys like this fight? Is this like an attractive one for you? Or
the whole card is kind of filler, but has good fights. Like, they needed to throw a card together, but they got some interesting matchups on there. It's kind of.
I actually don't hate this card. I found more and more fights as I was looking at it. I was like, oh, I kind of like that one. Why is it down there?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it doesn't jump off the page, like, but then you start diving into it, and it's like, oh, this has some decent chance to be pretty good here.
You like this one, Sean?
I don't mind it too much. I think what the UFC have done recently, very recently, in fact, is they've really tried to make just fun fights, even if they don't make that much sense. Even it's not Joe Silva matchmaking. They've been trying to do that. Someone asked me in my Q&A the other day, "Is this the worst card of the year?" Right, and I gave a bit of a Dana White answer, in that there are so many cards right now on this level. Right, let's say there's 50 cards in the year, 12 of them are pay-per-views, and let's say another, I don't know, 8 of them are like big cards. So we have 30, and we'll go to 20. We'll go to 20. There's 20 okay fight night cards throughout the year. You almost have to do what Dana White says and watch them and judge them afterwards, because like they're all the exact same. So like, is this worse than that? Oh, well, let's watch it and we'll decide afterwards. So I feel like this falls into another one. Like as you mentioned earlier, I didn't see the fights last weekend because I was at Bellator and then traveling home. Did I really miss out on anything? I know there was an injury. If there wasn't an injury in the main event, I would have missed out on a little bit more because that was an important fight and all. But like, if you didn't watch this, are you missing out on much? Like, Grant Dawson will probably win and probably move from number 14 to number 13, or maybe not move at all, or wherever he is. You won't miss much. But maybe it's a great fight night and there's loads of knockouts, and you're thinking, oh, I did miss a lot. And then Sunday morning you can go back and watch it. The Bellator card on the other side is brilliant. So you would be missing a lot if you missed that. Although maybe none of them will be champions by the time 2 weeks time comes.
Well, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation as far as what happens with Bellator. Before we shift completely over to the Bellator 300, which 100% is definitely the better card. It's inarguable. I mean, honestly, there's some fights here I like. I don't know why Chris Gutierrez, Montel Jackson is buried on the prelims here. I know that argument about like, why is it on the prelims? Why is it not? It gets old, but sometimes you have a fighter that's like, well, he's been on pay-per-view recently. Why are you putting him on the prelims of a fight night in Vegas, which really isn't trying to draw too many eyes. I just don't understand why they don't feature some of their talent in more prominent spots. They're obviously featuring Joe Pyfer. I know he's a favorite of you, Dan, against Abdul Razak Hassan. Do you like that fight, Dan, as a Pyfer guy?
Yeah, more so just because I want to see what Joe Pyfer can do. I kind of agree with Sean. Like they've just been trying to make exciting fights, regardless. I think recently in the past 2 months we had Fight Matrix ranked number 550 versus 820 or something. And I'm like, why does that fight have to happen in the UFC? Like they're just sucking up all this talent for really no reason other than to fill all their obligations to ESPN.
Sure.
So
yeah, if they're gonna do it, yeah, let it be fun. I think that's fair. I do like to highlight, Sean, at the end of these, we always highlight a fight that we think we're more likely going to talk about next week for our contested rounds. And, well, I didn't think anything made more sense than Kanaka Murata against Vanessa Demopoulos at 115 pounds. Disagree?
Never heard of him. Congratulations.
There you go.
I think we could have a 10-8 in the Grant Dawson Bobby Green. There's my prediction.
Oh, okay. I like that. I would be happy to talk about that, and I hope I wish well to the 8.
Bill Algio's getting a 10-8. That's what's going to happen.
Bill Algio against
Algio versus
Hernandez.
Hernandez. There'll be an 8 in that.
Gotcha. But yeah, let's shift over to Bellator because again, that is the better card. That starts main card at 10 p.m. Eastern time. It's in San Diego, so we're gonna have. By the way, this being in California and Nevada at roughly the same time. We're going to have some judges that are someplace and not the other place. So it'll be just like a few weeks ago where they're split.
Sean, like you said, I don't know if you knew, Chris Lieben made his Nevada. I'm sure you did know. He made his Nevada. That was probably one of the most interesting things to see for that card. Yeah. So,
and I think it's a little bit like this one as well because, okay, there wasn't a California, Nevada, but a lot of the judging crew were in Ireland. So I like that helped. If Sal D'Amato was there, maybe Chris Lieben wouldn't have got his go. So, congratulations to Chris Lieben. He deserves it. People are probably after this like, fighters are judging. It's way better. How long has Chris Lieben been judging and refereeing for years and years and years? So this isn't a guy who just decided to become a judge or a ref one day. He put years of work into it to get to where he has gotten to, and he very much deserves it.
It probably is, relatively speaking, even his experience as an official is still probably lesser than we often see before officials do get to Nevada, which it's considered a prestigious appointment, a prestigious place to get licensed. But he does have a wealth of fight experience that I can only imagine at least had to weigh a part into it because he knows what a fight looks like. No one will question that Chris Lieben knows what a fight looks like, but that he's also officiated a fight for a long enough time that we say, okay, we can give him that shot. It does make sense, 100%. But there's 4 title fights at Bellator 300. Usman Nurmagomedov, Brent Primus. That's also a lightweight Grand Prix semifinal. Chris Cyborg Katzengano, 145 title. Ryan Bader, Linton Vassal at heavyweight. Hopefully that goes one round. And then Liz Carmouche, Elimele McFarlane at 125.
I'm glad it's not in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's
true. We won't have a 40-minute entrance.
No, it'll be a little shorter. Sean, you already alluded to it. The fact that wonder what the stakes are for this being a Bellator event when we don't really know how much longer Bellator as an entity in and of itself is actually going to be around. But I mean, these are at least great fights, I think, in some cases, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's still very important because let's say Bellator falls on Monday morning, you have a better chance of being the Bellator lightweight champion and getting a big deal from the UFC or PFL than if you just lost the fight, So it's still big. And Johnny Eblin, I interviewed him at the weekend. I was like, what's the future for you? And he's like, it doesn't really matter to me. I'll be fighting somewhere in big fights. So and he said that after he won. So I think it is big for all of them. It's very interesting. Like, I think Usman Nurmagomedov is one of the best lightweights in the world. He's one of the best. You could nearly still call him a prospect because he's kind of still up and coming. I always tune in for a Chris Cyborg fight. Massive Chris Cyborg fan. Like, her and Amanda Nunes is my favorite fight of all time. I love that fight so much, and I'm glad that Zingano's getting the opportunity. I'm glad that Liam Le's getting the opportunity as well. And I see, Liam McCourt and Sarah McMahon down here as well. Obviously, a bit of Irish bias, but yeah,
I threw that on there for you.
Yeah, a big opportunity for Leah as well, because if she wins that, beats Sarah McMahon with Sinead Kavanagh just after losing, I think she could be the new number 1 contender, and maybe we could see Chris Cyborg fighting for a title in Ireland.
That could be, but for who? We don't
know. To be determined. We will see.
We will see. But you're right. I mean, there's stakes here, of course.
Didn't Johnny Eblin say he was not a fan of going to PFL because he'd fight once a year and he doesn't want to do that? He wants to fight often because they have no 185 there.
I don't
They're
think
gonna
anyone's going to know what the New World Order
Uh,
looks like yet.
No, they're going to have to change things if that happens. Like, you can't run all tournaments if you've that many fighters. I think you're going to have to, like, just keep Bellator going. Do some people in the tournaments and some people fighting in a normal promotion. But yeah, I don't know. This could turn into a whole other debate. But at the same time, one last sentence on it. I think what Dana White said about it, not to be hating or anything, but one company who loses money hand over fist is buying another company who loses money hand over fist. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to go well. So yeah, not great.
Yeah. I think that's well said. I think we can probably wrap up here, but before we do, Sean, I want to give you the chance to plug your content, all the stuff with everyone you work with.
Thank you. Yeah, I have the Sheehan show over on Sherdog.com that comes out 3 times a week. I usually have interviews. I do previews for all the Bellator One Championship, Cage Warriors cards, and then I have a betting show as well, which is usually out every Thursday. So 3 shows on Sherdog, and then Severe MMA, the Severe MMA podcast, every Sunday, although it was Monday last week. But we haven't missed a week in 435 weeks. So if you want the podcast every week, there at the Severe MMA podcast view. We also have Patreon. Patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast, which we have a Q&A every week. So if you want to ask about judging or anything like that, you can ask there. And we have loads of other podcasts there as well. And the last thing, the Severe MMA YouTube. We have loads of podcasts there all the time, loads of interviews. I actually interviewed Paul Hughes just before I dropped on here. So I think it'll be out before this is out because we're putting out first thing in the morning. So Paul Hughes fighting for Cage Warriors again, unfortunately, but he details about the UFC and how the negotiations went and everything there. So yeah, all of that is really fun. And Sean Sheehan BA on Twitter. You'll find everything there.
I would like to see Sean be a little more busy. He's kind of lazy. It just doesn't do much.
The old 7 podcasts a week.
and he's a recurring guest with Anik and Florian as well.
Yeah.
Should have your own corner there.
Yeah, Shawnee's judging corners. Although the last time I went on, I think it was it the day before? Or was the week before the Shevchenko fight? And John Anik was like, "Oh, I haven't had you on in a while." I was like, "Oh, there's been no judging controversies. Nothing is fucking 4 days later, the whole world blows up." So yeah, I won't be making that mistake again.
All right, that does it. We'll be back again with a normal show next week where we're actually breaking down all these rounds. Thanks again to Sean for joining us on this criteria talk.
Really appreciate Sean's presence as always, and we'll have to do it again sometime. But stick to the criteria. Maybe learn some ways we can change from here, and we'll talk to you in the future. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening.